on to the main event. Economist and futurist Kieran Casey Conway is the mind trust behind Red Shoe Economics, an independent consulting and forecasting firm furthering Casey's mission as the Red Shoe Economist. Through the observation, analysis, and interpretation of ever-changing economic factors impacting commercial real estate, Casey provides unique research initiatives, reports, and insights connecting the dots in the industry. Casey is a nationally recognized industry thought leader and subject matter expert with considerable real-life experience in the areas of macroeconomics, valuations, ports and logistics, banking regulation, real estate finance, MSA-level market monitoring, environmental risk management, housing economics, and tax appeals, with more than 30 years as a lender, credit officer, appraiser, instructor, and economist. Casey is recognized for accurately forecasting real estate trends and ever-changing influences on markets all across the United States. With credentials from the CCIM Institute, Counselors of Real Estate, and the Appraisal Institute, Casey currently serves as Chief Economist of the CCIM Institute, as an independent director for Monmouth REIT, and most recently was appointed to the Board of Trustees for the Appraisal Foundation, who is authorized by Congress as a source of appraisal standards and appraiser qualifications. A gifted and prolific speaker, Casey has delivered more than 850 presentations to industry, regulatory, and academic organizations over the last decade, and has been published in many national and regional magazines, journals, and newspapers, in addition to frequently contributing to radio and television programming regarding economics and the commercial real estate industry. So would you please put your hands together to help me welcome Casey Conway.
All right, great to be here. What would a red shoe economist be without his red shoes? So I did wear them today. My wife's getting concerned because I have more red shoes than she has total shoes in the closet. So I gotta have to start, disposing of some of them. So I know we got respect everybody's time here, so we'll jump right into it. So the heading for mine, I figured, is Georgia's on everybody's mind. And as you just heard from David on the numbers, a lot of folks. And so I'm going to give you more context. I think David was right on the numbers and some of his perspectives. I'm going to give you more context. We'll go on. So I think none of us collaborated before this to talk about the service side, but one of the things I think we forget to do sometimes is we are a service organization. It's a volunteer organization, and so I wanted to make sure we recognized our national leadership. So right now, we've got Les, and we have Dave Schnitzer from Texas coming up next, and behind him, Dieta. Dieta will be only our fourth woman to be our president of the Institute in 50-something years. So Barbara Crane was our last one. So those of you that, lots of women in the room here, we're clearing the pathway. Come on and take it over. Next slide. So, and then at your local level, you've recognized your service, but look at the number of people it takes to make this thing work, and then multiply that across all the chapters around the country in North America and the regional chapters as well. So really thank you. Thank you to our veterans today, but also you guys are kind of the veterans of our industry organization. So thank you very much. Next slide. So one of the things I learned in my days at the Federal Reserve was I had to have a good disclaimer because they couldn't believe what I would say. And it was always the truth. They didn't like telling you the truth. They still don't like telling us the truth about what's going on. And they make up terms like transitory and now transitory longer. And I'll give you what my interpretation of all of that is in a minute. So there's my disclaimer to protect all of you guys, Ryan. Next slide. So I think this slide here kind of shows what we're facing really the next year, whether people want to kind of tell you the truth or not. But on the left, we're going to have the Fed and FOMC, inflation, and logistics, and black swan events. Get ready. We have several big black swan events that are going to hit us next year. Biggest one I worry about is cybersecurity. We had a wake-up call with the Colonial Pipeline. We have a lot more, all of our utilities, everything. We are so vulnerable. And the rest of the world and the terrorists and the Russians and China and all them are sitting back saying, we didn't even need to invest in the military to take America down. We just had a cyber attack, a few things. So I think we really need to be on the watch out for black swan. But in the Federal Reserve on the left there, in case many of you don't realize it, we're in the 6th district. There's 12 of them. And so I generally recommend people, when I was at the Fed, don't read anything about the coastal Fed districts. Go to the inland like St. Louis and Kansas City because they deal with manufacturing and agriculture and logistics. And the coastal ones really don't know what's going on in our economy. The Atlanta Fed has more ports and logistics in our district second is the San Francisco Fed, and neither one of them produce anything on ports and logistics. No intelligence at all. So when I was there, I wrote the first report on after Hurricane Katrina. When I got a call from Bernanke, and he said, "Do the ports really matter to GDP?" Not kidding you. That was a question in 2006. It's still a question going on. So the cost of living, I'm going to talk a little bit about inflation. I'm going to scare the hell out of you, but you need to be scared. And then you need to make a plan for your clients and your own businesses. And then we'll talk about logistics. That picture at the top was actually a painted mural at the Omni Hotel in downtown Nashville, where one of the major brokerages was holding their National Logistics and Transportation Conference, and not one broker noted the mural. And so I jokingly said, this is what's wrong with supply chain. All the trucks are off the interstates. They're going through farmlands looking for warehouses or where they're being built, and we just need to get them back on track. But the mayor in Nashville was in attendance and thought I was serious and was calling his chief of staff to understand if trucks were getting off I-40. I said, it's just Casey humor. All right, we'll go on next slide. So we just did a piece on inflation. We just developed a award course. Some of you might have taken it last month. We're going to redo it in February after the Fed deals with all the year-end numbers. But it is a very serious thing. So if you really want to get deep in the weeds on inflation and the metrics and the things that I look at outside of government data like CPI, we do have that already in the box. Next slide. So this is the one slide. If it's busy, I'd get an F from a communications department professor on this because there's too much stuff going on, but it's takeaway value. All my slides are busy because I don't want you to have to send me an email and say, what did you mean by this slide? All my notes are on here. So this really just shows what's happened to inflation over time. You can see the two gray areas on the far left in the 1940s. What we had happen where the Fed got its first mandate in 1946 was when all the GIs were returning from World War II. We needed to put them to work, and so that's where in the Employment Act of 1946 the Fed got its first mandate, which is full employment. Then we cruised along into the 1970s, and by the time Jimmy Carter's in control and we have rapid inflation, they said, you guys need to have another mandate. You're not doing enough. And so they gave him the Humphrey-Hawkins Act. So sometimes you'll hear that the chairman has to give a speech in February and July every year to Congress, and sometimes they'll call it the Humphrey-Hawkins. That's where this came from. They mandated that the chair come to Congress twice a year and tell them what the heck they're doing to keep prices under control and give them an update. So those were the two mandates came from. I'm in the camp that we're about every 40 or 50 years you repeat the really worst thing that happened in your economy in the last 100 years. We're about ready to do it. And this is the 1970s coming back to it. And in the upper corner there, I'll give you my 3 or 4 reasons that we've got this. First of all, coming into the 70s from the 1960s, we had rampant deficit spending. In fact, the headlines were as dramatic as they are today about our deficit spending. What was it from? It was funding the Vietnam War. And so it was out of control. We had all this deficit spending. And then what did President Nixon decide to do? Let's take us off the gold standard. Let's make sure the dollar isn't worth a darn thing, that it's a fiat currency, that there's nothing behind it. And then he said, I got a neat trick to stop inflation. Just like the Fed has a neat one called their balance sheet. And he said, I'm going to put price controls in. Ta-da! Inflation's gone, solved. That didn't work out too good until Ford and Carter had to deal with it and take the controls off. The equivalent to that today is the Fed's use of its balance sheet. When I was at the Fed, when we started in 2005, we weren't even at $1 trillion. Then during the great housing recession, we went up to over $4.5 trillion. We got that paid down back below $4 trillion before COVID, and we're over $8 trillion headed to $10 trillion. It's unsustainable. The Fed's growing the money supply by about 20% in the last 18 months. It's devaluing the dollar. That's why commercial real estate's becoming more valuable. Because every time you got to go replace it or build new or build a new house, it costs 20 to 30% more because the dollar is worth 20 to 30% less. And then the last one, we had an energy shock. We had an oil embargo and an energy shock in the 1970s that rippled through the whole economy. What's the equivalent of the energy shock today? Supply chain shock. And just as it took years to deal with the energy shock, right? We had cars that were at least 50 feet in length, that didn't have cup holders, that got 8 miles a gallon. We had to replace all of that, and we got all these Japanese cars in that had lots of cup holders and got 20 miles a gallon. The same thing's going to happen to a supply chain. What the supply chain we have today that's anchored in the West Coast with LA and Long Beach, and we move things from the West Coast east and inland to where 70% of the population lives, east of Mississippi, we're going to change that. And it's all going to become north-south between Canada and the Gulf Coast and along the East Coast. And that means rail changes, rail mergers, port upgrades, our whole supply chain has to change. And that's going to take years to do. It's going to take years to build new chip plants and all the things that we need for our cars. These things just don't turn on a dime. So the Fed has started to recognize this, and they've changed the term from what? transitory inflation to transitory longer. Quit making up these terms. It's systemic inflation. Quit printing money, quit using the balance sheet, and have Congress quit going into deficit spending. Next slide. So you convinced about inflation? All right, so one of the things the Fed does, when I was there for 5 years, they talked about there's no inflation because we have this basket of goods. And back then, they actually went to the grocery store and they shopped for the same basket of goods, like box of cereal and steaks and whatnot, ground beef. And they'd say, see, the price is the same. Cheerios are $1.99 a box. So I went with them shortly after I got there and wanted to observe this. And I said, guys, wait a minute. That Cheerios box, it used to have 16 ounces, and now it has 14 ounces. And if you look at them today, it's like 12 ounces. I said, guys, that's inflation. Unless you only want your kids to eat cereal until Thursday, you got a problem. So they don't understand these things. They're academics. They're not real-world industry-based. And I've got a couple of arrows there. Housing is the biggest component of the basket of goods. And the Fed manipulates and the government manipulate the hell out of this number. So coming out of the great housing recession, what were home prices doing? They were collapsing. What do you think that was doing to CPI? You're saying we have deflation. Oh, God, we got to stop that. Let's take housing down from 40% of the CPI to 20-something percent. Ta-da! We don't have bad deflation. So now we have it going up, 20% or so a year. So it's been running now 40% of the CPI. Guess what they're going to do? Because it's showing too much inflation. They're going to collapse it back to something like 20%. So if you take transportation, you take food, and you take housing, that's 3/4 of CPI. And those numbers aren't running 6% like the CPI the other day. Try double digit, 10 to 20%. So we have real inflation, and they play games like heck out of this basket of goods. Next slide. So inflation I look for when we have systemic 1970s, you find it everywhere. So this was a neat graphic by the National Association of Home Builders. It showed everything over the summer, how much more it cost in housing. I pulled a few out. Paint and appliances up 60 to 70%. Those numbers now are like 80 to 100%. So if you just want to repaint your kid's bedroom, you're going to pay 70 to 80% more. If you want new appliances, who's looking at selling a home in the next year? Okay. When you sell it, do not include the appliances. You're going to need them to go to the new place. And then when you finally get your new ones, you can sell those used ones for about what the new ones cost. So do not include appliances in any home sale, okay? Make sure you get that message out, Eddie, nationwide, put it out there. News alert. I still can't get Luncheon to put that news alert on housing out there. In the upper left corner, I highlighted a couple of things, gasoline, home sales, and corn. So you can see, we all know gasoline, it was about $2.50 a gallon. Now it's about $3.50 to $3.75 a gallon. If you're in California, it's $85 a gallon. I'm not far off the mark. I just talked to them about that, and they were like, yeah, that might be right. And then if you look at home sales, we know those are up 25%. And look at corn. Why in the world would I put corn on there? Corn is in almost everything in the grocery store. It's in pop, it's soda pop. I'm not from the South, right? We don't call it that. I'm somewhere from out west, Colorado. It's in every stabilizing agent in our food. So if corn is going up, we're going to see rampant food inflation beyond just, price of steak going up in ground beef, so you got to go buy chicken or something. And then at the bottom, this is a neat one on housing that the National Association of Realtors put together. They looked at the spread between inflation, CPI, and home price appreciation. And until recently, it was greatest in the 70s, where you had 7% CPI and 9% housing inflation. So guess where we are today? We're now, as of yesterday, 6% CPI inflation and 12 to 15% on home prices. It's the biggest disparity we've ever had since World War II, and we were tracking data between inflation and the cost of housing, and it's not going to get better, not at all. So the millennials who's looking at maybe buying their first home in the room, a few of you, it's going to be tough. It's going to be real tough. All right, next slide. So here's where I really look to get really granular on commercial real estate impact on inflation. So forget all CPI, forget everything I just said. Let's just look at how it affects commercial real estate. One of my favorite metrics is ENR, Engineering News Record. They have a constructionomics section, and they look at building costs, and they look at construction costs. So the construction side is just the materials, and the building throws in the labor. In the spring of this year, we were at 4% and 6% on those two, respectively. Now we're running 8 to 14% on construction. If you can get the labor to show up, if they do show up and they give you their new number to rebid, that's another 15% higher, those numbers are dramatically understating the situation. They also have a city index. So if you look on there, you can see that New Orleans is actually the worst, over 30%. That's because of a lot of rebuilding from over 30 hurricane storms last year. Who's number two? Atlanta. So when you look at commercial construction costs, and when you look at what David was telling you about, what's happening in absorption and new construction and everything else, this is going to hit us like a cold slap in the face when you look at these numbers, because the developers, whether they're commercial or whether they're residential, they're trying to bid jobs today. And whatever they just do and refine their bids, by the time they get ready to deliver the commercial space or the houses, those numbers are going to be up 20 to 30%. And so if you have forward contracts and you tell we're the banks in here. So any bankers in here that say, yeah, but I've got everything pre-sold. No, don't do pre-sales right now. Just make sure they put up more down payment, but don't make the pre-sale price. Make them open contracts. We are going to have a real problem. Sorry, you had a question?
Say that I've heard already from some contractors in the healthcare space, they're only guaranteeing prices for 2 weeks. In other words, if you don't start your build out, they're not going to guarantee the number because they can't get the supplies for that.
Yep.
They're not going to bust the number. So it's also, I'm absolutely hurting the healthcare space with even the recs.
Yeah, it's hitting everybody, healthcare, hospitality, you name it. And it's only going to get worse, and the construction loans are going to get more out of whack. Because what do you have in a construction loan? Cost overruns. Who gets to fund the cost overruns? Do you think the banker does? Hell no. They can put it on you to have your equity partner put up more money. We are going to have real debates with lenders in construction loans next year, and this is an opportunity for CCIMs to come in, help arbitrate, help figure it out, because the lenders just shooting themselves in the foot if they shut it off and don't fund it, because what good does it do to have an incomplete project and the contractor walk out? So this is one of my favorite ones. Go on to the next slide. So then, okay. I don't know why it's doing that. All right. Who knows what it's doing? It's inflating. See, even the PowerPoint is recognizing inflation. So this is another one. I understand what the slide is. This is look at some of the commercial property price indices. This is Green Street, and they look at which properties are going up the most. So David showed. Have no idea what it's doing. Are you just using the down arrow maybe? Or there we go. Okay. So this shows self-storage has had the biggest price increase, over 30%. We're going to overbuild the hell out of it. Don't make a construction loan on self-storage right now. It's going to blow up. Industrial is very strong, very sustainable. You saw David's number. We could build 500 million square feet of new warehouse a year for the next 3 to 5 years, and we won't move the vacancy needle off 5%. It's that much in demand. Because it's not just stuff in a mall that we were doing before COVID. It's groceries, it's services, it's everything you can imagine is online. We took what was going to evolve over about 7 years, and we've compressed it into about 2. And the supply chain hasn't caught up. Next slide. So this is a new one for CCIM. So who went to Pittsburgh? Anybody? So if you went to the CCIM technology piece, we introduced the new CREPI, the Commercial Real Estate Property Index. So this is one where I worked with CCIM technology, and we said, let's keep this simple and have something that's free, deliverable to CCIMs that you can give to your clients. We're going to promote this. We're going to try to have it in the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, really get some visibility. But what we did is we picked these 10 metrics at the bottom, and we blended them in an algorithm, and we back tested them to see, do they correlate to what happened in prior recessions and recovery? And, you know, if I was involved, of course it had a perfect correlation, so I never get it wrong. So this will be coming out, and it'll be a neat tool that you have that's simple to understand the metrics. It's not overweighted in housing or jobs or whatever. It's got a good blend and mix here. And so this will be coming to look for it in December. Next slide. And so that's the inflation news. Are y'all depressed? Yeah, okay, very done. All right, now we're going to build you back up so you can feel like having dessert. So the next big thing is population migration. And so you heard David talk about where we stack up and how strong we're doing. It's because we're winning the population and business migration battle. So every year, get ready in January, the moving companies, U-Haul and United Van Lines, will release their moving reports. So the last one that came out in January, you can see that 5 of the 10 markets in the country that had the most net move-ins were in the South. And Georgia was in there in these top 10. You can see it's right there on there. But we're also seeing a lot in the Midwest. The Midwest has affordability. Underlying this population migration, underlying this remote work and office and business move was something that was happening before COVID. It was called affordability. And every non-affordable city in the Northeast and the West Coast, the people were piling out. They were able to prove during COVID that you could leave and work wherever you want, and employers found that you were more productive, actually. And that model is here to stick. This is as systemic as when the GIs came home from World War II. And so I'm going to have a little different opinion. If you've got urban office, Get the hell out of it before it goes down another 20%. Suburban and secondary markets, I'm going to show you, it's off the charts. Because employers in the workforce are telling their employers, we want to work or have a place to go to a couple days a week that's close to home, that's in the suburbs, that doesn't involve a commute, that doesn't involve parking, that doesn't involve dry cleaning. All of those things gone. $500 a month, hey, now I can get a jet ski, a boat, and a new car, all because I don't have to commute. So that's the good news there. Next slide. So then we got the census data, and the census data has been affirming what these U-Haul and Van Lyne's migration reports have been showing. So you can see in the South how strong we've been in terms of our growth. The strongest was Utah. Salt Lake City is amazing. Utah is competing for business with us. Our other competitor is Eddie. You got to get him out of here before he sees the rest of my slides. North Carolina is our primary competition in Georgia, and it's winning a lot, and it's got a great port in South Carolina. So that's our main competition, and then believe it or not, Utah. Utah's becoming a major manufacturing. Who's from Alabama? Went to Alabama? Knows somebody from Alabama? Knows that they're going to lose the SEC championship this year? Did I get that right? I finally now know that the SEC is not the Securities and Exchange Commission. I flunked all those courses when I went to Alabama, for teaching. So what happened in Alabama is all of the census survey taking is primarily done in the fall. What goes on in the fall? SEC football. They wouldn't answer the door. They weren't at home. So they need an SEC football adjustment factor in the next census so that, because things are going really well. If you've been to Huntsville, if you've been to Birmingham, if you're looking at what's happening down at the Port of Mobile, it's incredible. It's another Carolinas, Georgia type of story. So we're doing very well. The only place on the West Coast that did well in the last census was Washington State. But remember, that was front-loaded for the first 7 or 8 years. In the last 2 years, not so good. So if you extrapolate those later 2 years, I've been out there recently. It's a nice place, has lots of construction cranes. It's incredibly unaffordable. Everybody wants out. They're going to Boise. They're going to Salt Lake. They're even coming here to Georgia. Next slide. So how many of you realize the new Emerging Trends 2022 report came out? Came out this week. Incredible piece of work. Very reliable. So let's see where Georgia stacked up. So in the middle, the overall results, we came in at number 8. So 5 of the top 8 are all in the Southeast. So this population, this workforce, everything, it's coming here. That's why we're seeing strong absorption, strong rental numbers, strong housing price numbers. On the left, if you look at just investor demand, where do investors want to put their money? Again, Atlanta was in the top 15. It even beat out Seattle. So when you think of the Asian money that wants to go into Seattle, we beat out Seattle in terms of where investment capital wants to go. And if you look on the right side in terms of development, notice one thing, no dark green. There is no strong interest in new development because it's so hard to forecast and bid the numbers. But the lighter green, you can see we make it in there. And again, it's a Southeast story. It's Tampa, it's Raleigh, it's the Carolinas, it's Georgia. We're the places you can still get affordable land. You still can get things approved from a zoning standpoint, except for Atlanta. Get outside the perimeter. We need the mayor to fix this stuff, right? And so this is a very compelling story. If you haven't read it or got it, let me know. I'll send it to you. It's a great read. Next story, next slide. So that emerging trends thing, here's what's happening. We are back in the game of winning site selection in Georgia. We've been losing, like to Alabama, Toyota, Mazda, Airbus, Walmart's expansion. We've been losing to Tennessee. We lost in the H2 headquarters. We've won others that are office. But here's the latest. We're going to have firearms. We're going to solve our public safety problem. So the new mayor is going to give all of us a firearm, right? So we can just deal with the policing or whatnot. But this is a big win, and this one is going down into LaGrange. So when you look at these site selections, we're winning on the north side of Atlanta, we're winning on the west side, we're winning on the south, we're winning all around the perimeter area. So what this means is more strength and more demand and more real estate for really outside the perimeter activity. So this one's down in LaGrange. I just got the first rock quarry rezoning approved down in Lamar County in 10 years in Metro Atlanta. We need tons of that stuff, but we have this massive NIMBYism that can't realize that everything that we need, whether it's toilet paper or concrete for our driveways or our new home building, it's got to go somewhere. And you know, we have the richest reserves outside of Connecticut for aggregates, yet we can't get it rezoned, even in a rural place like Butts County or Lamar County. Next slide. So here's the other one that just won. Huge story. Who's following Hyundai and SK Battery's story in Georgia? Hyundai wants to put over $7 billion in capital improvements. They want to move most of their manufacturing out of South Korea to the United States. They want it in Georgia and Alabama because they don't like their neighbors to the north, just like we don't like our neighbors in New Jersey and New York and the north as well. So we want it all down here. So this one was just announced, and this one was the one that went out in the Conyers area. But we've also got them going out Commerce, the new battery plant. And EV auto manufacturing and supply chain is just going to explode in the Southeast here. Next slide. So I want to warn you about two things to make sure you take out of all your electronic devices. Do not follow these next two resources at all. They're going to get, on my third slide, the award that I give things like this. So how many of you have heard of CNBC's Top States for Business Growth? Used to be a great study, great report until this year. And then what they did is in the red box here, they added a new category called Life, Health, and Inclusion. Translation, ESG, right? And so they view many of us in the South, they view Texas with the border crisis as you're not inclusive, you don't let people in. And so they weighted this thing more than almost all economic metrics. And we fell quite a bit down. We only made, in the 8 ranking. But look at Florida. Florida got such a bad inclusion rating because Trump moved there after the White House and everything else, that they didn't even make the top 15. Now, seriously, how many of you think that Florida at least belongs in the top 5 or 10? They're number 1, 2, or 3 on every economic metric, from small business growth, housing growth, population growth, and they gave them a horrible 40 rating on that, and Florida ranks number 17. And then you look at Texas. It came in at number 49. Look at where we are in Georgia in 45. This stuff with the politicization of economic metrics is toxic. If we don't understand this, these things and these studies get picked up on those that are investing capital outside the United States and outside Georgia, and they don't go into the footnotes, and they don't understand what's going on here. So I give this one what you'll see in 2 slides. Next slide. The other one. How many of you know that the Atlanta Fed has something called CREMI? Don't confuse it with CREPI from the CCIM. CREMI, the Commercial Real Estate Monitor Index. So when I was at the Fed, we created this thing called Real Estate Market Spotlight. We looked at 180 markets. We used industry data like CoStar and Apartments Rent. We used a lot of good private data and was very transparent. They couldn't understand it, so a few years after I've left, now they've created this CREMI. Now here's the first thing they did. So if you're in the real estate industry, do you think on a map or a shading or a coding that green and blue is generally pretty good? Yeah? No, the Fed said, y'all are wrong. It's bad. It's downtrending. And yellow and orange and red now are good and improving. So all of us are confused when we look at this thing. Look at how much they have in the Southeast United States that's rated green and blue as deteriorating. Most all of North Georgia, the Carolinas, North Florida, Orlando and above. The second thing is this thing is not transparent. It's not transparent like you can go to CoStar or other sources or emerging trends with the ULI and actually find out what's going. So what they're doing is they're taking CoStar data. You guys need to knock this off. And they're reinterpreting it. And they're taking Moody's data and reinterpreting it, and they're not telling you how they're doing it, and they're coming up with contradictory opinions. And so either you need to get them on board with being transparent or fire them. Just get them out of using your data. They're misusing it, and they're putting out barbecue sauce. Next slide. This is what I give these reports. So the Red Shoe Economists, we've now started co-packing our own barbecue sauce. So most of you have heard me speak know that when something is BS, I've learned that the polite way after 40 years in the South, 81 to 21, is you call barbecue sauce on it and you make sure you have a pineapple on your mailbox, that you're very welcoming. So I'm very welcoming to come to a barbecue, and barbecue sauce is what I call that on. Our co-pack stuff, send me an email, we'll send you some for the holidays. It says, this is entirely healthy, no calories, cures cancer, cures COVID, and then on the front we put our label, I'm calling barbecue sauce on this. So you can sprinkle it on something. So Richard, you get a bad deal. You can sprinkle some barbecue sauce on the submission, or you can just put the bottle on something on your table. So those two are barbecue sauce. Don't partake of them. Next slide. So where do I go? I go to places, whether we go to like CoStar, but I also go to Site Selection Magazine for my overall macro view. They do a state of the state every year. They're very transparent. They give you your metrics. Here's Georgia. You can see where we're really strong. Research and development, our universities, think Emory, Georgia, Georgia Tech, everything, Morehouse, our colleges here in the Atlanta area. Look at, number 4 in terms of workforce readiness. Right? So we're producing the workforce that we need. We're affordable, we're fiscally balanced, and guess what? We have affordable electricity rates. This is going to be darn important, especially if you're building electric vehicles, and we're going to put everything that we transport on the same number of power plants that we do everything else with commercial real estate. We're going to need power and cheap stuff, and they're not going to be able to do it in California. They're not going to be able to do it in other parts of the country. Next slide. So here's another one. So many of you saw this announcement by Hyundai earlier this year, or the end of last year, up in Commerce, Georgia, where they said we're going to build all of our electric vehicle batteries. Phase 1's almost done. Phase 2 in Commerce is coming in. This 85 corridor from Commerce, Georgia, and really up near your part, we're not going to let you participate in North Carolina. Sorry, can't do it, Eddie. But the 85 corridor all the way down through Montgomery, through West Point, all the way down to Port of Mobile, this is going to become the mega, not only Southeast or Georgia corridor for logistics and industrial, it's going to become a new major supply chain corridor as important as the Inland Empire in California. Port of Mobile is converted completely from bulk commodities to containers. It will surpass the Port of Charleston in container count within 2 to 3 years. It'll be over 3 million. Port of Charleston's at 2.5 million today. It's going to be renamed the Port of Alabama, and guess what they're going to do? They finally realized that South Carolina and Georgia were onto something with inland ports, and they will be announcing shortly the first new inland port in Montgomery, Alabama. And this corridor is becoming a new efficient logistics supply chain backdoor into Atlanta. The 75 corridor. Who's been down 75 down to Macon or down to Locust Grove? It is hell. Right? And they didn't do the truck lane stuff. They didn't do the import-export highway. And so many of the suppliers are saying, well, we love Savannah, and it's growing like mad. We need another back door. And it's going to be the Port of Mobile or Port of Alabama, up 85, inland port in Montgomery, into Atlanta. The land costs are 40% less, and the congestion is about 1/3 what it is on the 75 corridor. So if you want an opportunity, go drive from Noonan down to Montgomery, and you just won't believe what you're seeing there. And in fact, Hyundai just announced their other SK edition at the West Point Kia plant, which they own. Next slide. So here's the battery plant up in Commerce. Phase 1's done. Phase 2 is next. So they'll be producing over 600,000 batteries at this facility, probably about the second most anywhere in North America. And it's just going to continue. We got the synergies between Tennessee, Alabama, and Georgia. We will be the EV manufacturing capital of North America. Next slide. So this is the other one that Hyundai just announced on the along the I-85 corridor. This is part of the deal down there at the Kia with more product. Next slide. So let's talk about ports. We cannot talk about the Atlanta and Georgia economy and understand David's numbers on industrial if we don't understand the ports. So here's Georgia. If you look at the bottom in the green box, we were barely doing about 2 million containers a year about 15 years ago. We will break 5 million containers this year, and guess who we will surpass? Next slide. New York. New York's the busiest container port until December's numbers come out. We will be the LA, and I've been talking about this for a decade, that Savannah and Charleston would become the LA and Long Beach of the East Coast. That happens really at the end of this year. And it's not that they're not doing good. They're growing by over 30%. Incredible growth there. We will hit the 5 million mark. We will go to 7 to 10 million within 3 to 5 years. That is how rampant the growth is at the Port of Savannah. They've been developing the inland ports. We got the new one up in North Georgia for the Kabuto tractors, and the Northeast Georgia, the Appalachian one. So we'll have 3. South Carolina has 2. Alabama has 1. All 3 of these come together. We can solve the supply chain without LA and Long Beach. It's all done. We're going to move goods north-south. Next slide. So here's South Carolina. This is a story that I tell Georgia and Alabama to envision. The big blue dot on the lower right there, that's the port of Charleston. All those other blue dots, those are industries that have doubled or come to South Carolina in the last 12 years under the leadership of the port director, Jim Newsom, because they developed inland ports, intermodal, and upgraded the port and deepened and added new terminal space. That's our opportunity. So we've got to figure this out and help support the Port of Georgia. And sometimes we get governors that understand it, and sometimes we get them that say, what's a port, you know? So we need to get them all on board. So before the new mayor and any new governor comes on board, we need to have a CCIM Ports and Logistics Training Seminar to get them all to understand this. Give them the 101. Next slide. So top 10 issues. I'm a counselor of real estate. Our top 10 issues this year, I wrote the logistics and adaptive use. Logistics was part of the top 10. It was our number 4. You can read my short version of that. Forget the pause for Q&A. We don't have time. You're going to have to suffer through it. Next slide. So this is the first paper that I wrote at the University of Alabama. See, in Alabama, since they're not here, They're like in football, they understand X's and O's and pictures, but they don't really read very well. So we had to develop, see, I'm safe in Georgia today, right? So we developed my own logistics transformer to show what logistics looks like. So the shoulders is air cargo, the breastplate is containers, the arms are shipping and rail, and then the trucking in the bottom. And really what this paper was designed to do, and every page of this paper has pictures and graphics. It was my dream after leaving kindergarten, because I didn't like that they took away all the picture books after kindergarten. I hated the books that just had letters. So every one of my papers will have lots of pictures and graphics. I promise you it has lots of them. But the two key points are, what we're doing, everything in our economy today, is we're migrating from a shop and take-home economy to order online and deliver to me. And how we get logistics and everything to work through that is really important. The other one is LI for logistics infrastructure. The where and why of every number that David just shared with you is, where is the logistics infrastructure? Ports, rail, interstate, truck, all of those. Where do they come together, and where do you have the workforce? And we're right at the middle of that. We're at the epicenter of that with air cargo, with rail, with ports. And if you have it, they all will come. And that's what's happening in the kind of the why behind David's numbers. Next slide. So then we updated this summer. I don't know if you guys realize we issued a last mile logistics. So, I'd get in trouble with the dean whenever I would talk about this. I said, last mile logistics is kind of like pornography. When you see it, you'll say, oh, that's it. But nobody could really tell you what last mile logistics. So we really dissected it. So if you hadn't read this report, we really did a good job. Thank you to the CCIM Institute for seeing that over the goal line. Next slide. There's two other things that are coming. How many, you've all heard of, manufacturing or first mile. You've all heard of last mile. Who's heard of middle mile? Incredibly important. And we're part of the middle mile. So the middle mile are all the entities, the regional package carriers that basically fill the gap that Amazon and FedEx cannot fulfill. So every holiday when Amazon and FedEx can't deliver 2, 3, 4, 5, this year maybe 10 million packages a day because the capacity doesn't work, they turned entities like On Track out of Phoenix or LSO, and these regional package carriers said at the beginning of September, we're full, see you later, Amazon and FedEx, figure it out yourself. So if you haven't ordered your Christmas stuff, you're screwed. Get gift cards, give cash, do those type of things. And we'll wrap it up real quick here. So that's the middle mile, and they're going to need a lot of warehouses. So everything David was talking to you about, these guys are going to need to store stuff until FedEx and Amazon are ready to pick it up. Next slide. FedEx, they're going to be very profitable. Their stock has gone down lately. Their new management hasn't done a good job explaining about work shortages. Guess what? They're going to have an incredible fourth quarter. Going to have max capacity, and they're putting all kinds of new surcharges from $6 if you just say, don't leave the package at my front door, put it around by the garage door. That's an extra $6 that Amazon's not carrying. If it's a box that's a little big, and it's bigger than their standard weight, they're going to charge you up to $60 more. And if it's something really big and bulky, like you're sending grandma, grandpa, father-in-law golf clubs, or grandma a new microwave, it could be hundreds of dollars in surcharges. So their surcharge revenue is going to be off the charts. And when we get the fourth quarter numbers and we get the new earnings in late January, mid-February, you're going to wish you had bought FedEx. Just like I told you when to buy Bitcoin at $100, you're going to wish you had bought FedEx all beaten down right now. I'm not a stockbroker. I'm not part of the SEC. Those are all my disclaimers. Next slide. So this is the changing big box. So I told you about the story there, all the trucks not knowing where to go and find the warehouses. This is the latest from Prologis in their third quarter earnings. And Prologis said we have almost 1 billion square feet, right, David? 1 billion square feet, and we're full. 99% occupancy. Our REIT, we've been 99% occupancy for 3 years in a row. There is no excess capacity. Everybody renews. So when you have that, you're going to see more of what David just said to you, more absorption, more rental rates. It's going to be like if you have a house for sale, coming soon, you put that sign, coming soon, this warehouse, and you got 10 bid offers, and they're going to be up 25 or 30%. No contingencies, and $100,000 more than the last bidder on that warehouse, right, David? So that's reality of what it looks like. Next slide. So this is a neat piece that was done a year ago. They're updating it right now by Real Capital Analytics. This is a cool one you could do, David, with all your data in CoStar. But if you looked a year ago, what we saw was most warehouses were selling for under $100 a square foot. And RCA said, what's the deal with this stuff that's selling for $175, $185 a square foot? And I raised my hand and I said, those are all the acquisitions in our REIT. Triple net leased, FedEx, 20-year term, inflation protection, CPI increase, the box costs more, it needs more land. That's what that's all about. And so when you look at segregating the data in CoStar, understand what you're trying to value or underwrite. If it's a bigger e-commerce deal, these things are breaking $200 a square foot. Every one we build every 6 months, the cost of it goes up $25 a square foot for the same FedEx building, the same Amazon building. And so FedEx and Amazon, they say, don't worry about it. Even Home Depot, the new one we built from down in Locust Grove, they said, don't worry it. The real estate warehouse pieces aren't even 2 to 3% of our total operating costs. Who cares what the cap rate is? Who cares what the rent is? If we get the wrong location, we're screwed. Our whole supply chain is messed up. So they're willing to pay up, and they use these warehouses 24/7. There's a lot more technology and construction that goes into them. So you kind of got to understand what you're doing and valuing. Next slide. So this is a recent report over the summer by CBRE. This was shocking. For the first time in their company's history, anybody from CBRE? Anyway, if they are, tell them it was a good job. They said for the first time in their company's history, every single industrial market in North America saw cap rates go down. Every market, no matter how small, no matter how large. So it's showing you that investor demand. Next slide. And then what they said just recently is here's their rent forecast. And they said the absorption, like David was saying, these numbers are going up. Look at where Atlanta is. They're forecasting 25% rent escalations. You know, I think if you're in self-storage, if you're in apartments, anything residential, you just need to call it a warehouse. Warehouses people, and you can get these kinds of numbers. It'll just lease up, code it into CoStar, warehouse, and let them get it into the warehouse database. Next slide. So here's where the rail, we don't appreciate this as much in Atlanta as we should. So these colored spaghetti lines are our 7 Class 1 railroads. You'll notice that there's only 2 that service the West Coast, Union Pacific and BNSF, and everything else goes through the center of the United States, comes through Atlanta, comes through the Southeast, it ends up Port of Mobile, Georgia, or South Carolina. This is how the supply chain is going to change. We're going to speed through the Panama Canal and the Gulf into Port of Mobile, Port Freeport next to Houston, into the southeast. We're going to come through the Suez Canal into the East Coast, which has more traffic now than the Panama Canal. And we're going to move supply chain north-south, not west-east. It's going to take about 2 to 3 years for that to fully play out, and we're the beneficiaries of that. Next slide. Here's the rail story. How many of you have been following about the Kansas City Southern Volley between being merged with one of the 2 Canadian railroads, Canadian National, Canadian Pacific? Well, it's gone back and forth almost all year. Canadian Pacific just won. That means they come down to the into Port of Mobile. That's a huge beneficiary for us because all the stuff that comes out of Mexico, everything that comes out of the Panama Canal moves up through Kansas City Southern into the U.S. All the components for Mercedes and Toyota and all of our cars, they all are built in Mexico. So this is huge for us. Now, not only in Atlanta can we tap Savannah and Charleston, but we can also tap the Port of Mobile. There's no other major city that can tap those 3 major ports. Next slide. So I look at the REIT and NAREIT data to look at what's happening with property price appreciation. So this is interesting. Where are your retail folks? So we heard retail maybe was not so good. I'm going to tell you where it's really good. So Eddie knows Tim Blair, our winding down CCIM global president. He coined the term influence density, right, Eddie? And you do a lot of retail. And what that means is when you have lots of dense households that have wealth and high incomes, that's where retail's doing really well. So forget the failed mall, but look at the shopping centers that are going more services than goods selling. And look at what's happening to shopping centers. They are actually up 4% in value. They're the niche in the retail. So don't be in the mall, don't be at the big box, but be at that neighborhood. So, you know, example like in Birmingham would be Overlook. An example here would be looking at something in Duluth, looking at something in Alpharetta. And these shopping centers, they don't even have to be anchored, but they're near it. And they've got good households. Watch what's happening. They're becoming services oriented. The restaurants are backfilling, nail salons, pet daycare, pet grooming's bigger than people grooming now. And they pay higher rents. I just did a study. Pet grooming places pay more per square foot than hair salons for people. How's that tell you about the importance of pets? So if you also look at industrial strong, you can see apartments not so much. On the office, I think I've got one more slide next to show you on the office. So I want to tell you about office. So here's my bellwether metric for office. Who has heard of the Castle Systems? Castle Systems, that's awesome. They own the data for the key card systems that we use to access our office, and they track who's going to the office. And they're telling us that only 36% of us are going back to the office. And they show the major cities. The most are in Texas, Austin, Dallas, Houston. They're over 50%. The worst are the West Coast. Nobody wants to live there. Nobody wants to go to work there. They all want to come here to the south and inland. And so if we don't see this number go back to 50, 60%, the urban office environment's in a lot of trouble. and it's going to be primarily show up in sublet. And when you look at the sublet numbers, companies may continue to keep the space, but they're going to reprice it. So they're not going to pay 30 to 50 bucks a square foot. They're going to say, if I can only put half the people there, it's only worth half that number. So we've got a major repricing coming in our urban office, even though companies may take the space or expand further. So that's my favorite bellwether, and I haven't been wrong on this one yet. Next slide. So we just did a new paper we just released, CCIM Institute for the Pittsburgh Global Conference on office. So I went through the future office work. We're going to have to redo every analytical tool and metric that we use in office going forward. We used to have ratios that said for every job created, somewhere between 1 and 2 of them are office jobs. Forget it. They're not. And where are the office jobs going? They're going to suburbs and secondary markets. I'm working on 2 assignments right now for major corporate entities, one tech and one financial services, that have said we want to sublet all of our urban office space, and we want somewhere between 1 and 150 closed branch banks converted to satellite offices that are near where our workforce is. This is the future. It's smaller. It's bite-sized. All of those 1980 vintage office parks that we saw that we were getting rid of 3 years ago and nobody wanted them, they are the new gold mine. They're drive up. They're easy to get to. They're near your workforce. It's suburban, and it's in a secondary city. Next slide. So here's the one by Real Capital Analytics. This is fascinating. So they're the only entity I know that break out suburban and urban office, and they look at the transactions. And they show what's happening in CBD office. It's down over 3%, but look at what's happening in suburban office nationwide. It's up almost 15%. We have a watershed event going from urban to suburban. This is a goldmine opportunity. Just drive around and look at what's happening, talk to corporate users. They're all trying to figure out how to ditch the office and go to sublet. Next slide. So I'm going to do a few ones on housing. So housing, this is the future. If you own a house, great. You're going to have a lot of wealth. If you don't, you should have. Look at Atlanta. We're up 20% year over year. Look at all these markets in the Case-Shiller. Next slide. So this is listing activity and looking what's happening on, or the median list price. So the upper line is where we are today. Look at these listing numbers. They're off the charts. In my neighborhood, we've had 3 homes sell since August. Every single one of them. They put the sign up on Friday, coming soon. By Sunday night, they had over 10 offers, and the final offer that won was no contingencies and $1,000 over the last offer. And they all closed, and they all set record prices. And guess what they had a problem with? The frickin' appraisal. Because the appraiser said, well, I hadn't seen that house sell yet. Well, it's selling. There's a willing buyer, a willing seller. You know, as a 3rd generation MAI, I'm ready to ring them all out. That's why I'm going on the Appraisal Foundation's Board of Trustee. I'm going to reform the appraisal industry. We're going to fix this damn thing. So you can see down here some of the others on the bottom. Look at San Francisco. You know, look at San Jose and Silicon Valley. A less than 2,000 square foot ranch home that needs renovation, $1.2 billion. Then you make a trip to Atlanta, or you see why Tesla's moving to Texas, and they say, "Wow, I can buy that same house for 1/3 the price and afford to live here. Where am I going? Anywhere but California. Anywhere but the West Coast." Next slide. So here's where the new construction activity is going. So here's the good news. We hear builders aren't building enough, and that's true, because the builders, right, Jeff, they got rid of the old model from 2008 and 9, which says we'll make up for it on volume. So forget the margin. We'll just build a lot of this stuff and hope it's, so they got rid of that model. It's now all about margin. And if you don't have a 20% margin in a price point or a geography, they won't build there. And for Richard, for the housing affordability, we've got to rethink it. We got to look at alternatives like for-rent subdivisions, manufactured home communities, more density. Cities, get over it. We got to have more density. You know, that's the other thing we'll do with the new mayor. We'll do a thing on housing density and how to fix all that stuff. But we're part of the solution. Look at Houston, Dallas, Phoenix, Atlanta, and Austin are building almost 25% of all the new homes in this country. That's amazing. And incredible stories. That's great for our economy. And guess what all those people need? They need help from CCIMs finding land and getting it entitled. Our skill sets, our investment management skills. Next slide. So this is the latest on NHAB. The cost to build, it's just getting worse. 12%, 20% up this year, setting records. So we're not going to get more inventory for affordable. We're building as much as we possibly can. We face local government opposition. So that's not going to get fixed. So let's look at this last slide on housing. So here's the new challenge, labor. We are facing a major labor challenge, just like in retail, just like in industrial. And if you look at some of these numbers, you know, you look at the bottom here, that construction employment accounts for almost 7.5 million of our total employment in the country. Residential is half of that. We need 61,000 new residential construction hires every month. Not going to happen. Not while they don't have to pay rent or mortgage or have federal entitlements and have no incentive to work, or they're old like me that are over 50 and it takes too much Aspercream to get my body to work to go work at a site. It's just not going to happen. So we have a lot of problems to fix. And the reason I want to share that with you is so when you hear my inflation talk, how do any of these things get fixed in 2 or 3 quarters like the Fed says? This isn't transitory. This is systemic in everything that we've got. And they don't have a clue as to what they're going to do. They've already got interest rates at low. They've already blown up their balance sheet. All the tools that we used in the 70s or we had available, like Reagan, he could bring rates down low. We could spend on deficits because we didn't have much deficit. All those tools are gone. So what's the new tool that the Fed or Congress are going to have? Unless it's called bankrupt the country and have China just buy us. They'll do a discounted cash flow on our debt and say, we'll offer you 20 cents on the dollar and we'll take over the whole damn place. All right? Next slide. So I'll do a little bit on retail. I look at the headlines. Retail's not terrible. As David told you, it's not horrific. Look at some of these headlines. We have IPOs going in retail. My first red shoes were Allbirds. They just did an IPO. And Amazon even tried to destroy them in the process because they wouldn't sell on Amazon. So we have IPO activity. They got a challenge on labor as well. Look at Starbucks, $18 starting wages. Look at school bus drivers in Metro Atlanta, $24 an hour, and you get benefits. Oh my God, if my little company doesn't make it, I'm going to go be a school bus driver half the day, get my dang benefits and work half the day. So retail's not horrible. Next slide. The thing in retail, it's about adaptive reuse. Look at things like North Lake Mall. Look at Emory moving in there. They're recreating the shopping foot traffic with office traffic. And that will rejuvenate all of that business and commercial real estate around it. Look at Gwinnett Place Mall. They tried everything, and the last one was a cricket stadium. And that failed, so Gwinnett bought the damn thing and said, we're going to figure out how to deal with this on a neighborhood approach. Next slide. So the new paper we wrote on adaptive reuse is called a neighborhood approach. If you want to get adaptive reuse right, we did this paper with a grant from the realtors and the South Florida Miami realtors, where we looked at the adaptive reuse strategies in South Florida. And every one of them, they've gone into communities like Doral, and they've done a zoning overlay. And they've told developers, where can you do housing? Where do we need green space? Where can you do commercial space? And it's exploding, incredibly successful. And most small businesses want to be in something different. It's part of their identity, right? And so they want to go into adaptive reuse, and it works pretty well. Next slide. So here's a little thing that tells you the difference between adaptive reuse 1.0 and adaptive reuse 2.0, and the difference is look at it as a neighborhood. If we can get our city leaders, if we can get our local government to look at adaptive reuse broader than one-off projects. Next slide. Don't forget the green space. Look at what we've done in Atlanta. Look how important the Beltline has been. Look at what the High Line did in New York. Look at what Rotary Trail did in Birmingham, Alabama. This is the underline in Miami that's connecting the poorest neighborhoods to the richest and most affluent like Coral Gables. And what the green space has the opportunity to do is reconnect what interstates and highways divided. And this is how we bring communities and social diversity. So it's good ESG. And you can get actually better bond money for it. Next slide. So I'll close on this. So I have 3 special needs kids, all adopted. This is my youngest, Luke. So when we finally got everything lifted and we could go out for his birthday this summer, I said, what do you want to do? And he says, I just want to go to our favorite restaurant and have a cold root beer. So this is him for his birthday enjoying a cold root beer. And then I just got my 67 Mustang that I got from my father 43 years ago. And we restored it. This is the 4th restoration. I just got it back, brought it home, and here's Luke saying, I'm claiming this sucker, Dad. Forget these Japanese cars or whatever else, and you can't afford a good German convertible, right, Jeff? And so there he is in his, now he's wearing his Kansas City Chiefs Super Bowl hat. So Charles Barkley got us connected with Mahomes and got him that autographed hat. So he's in the cool Mustang. So we're going to have a lot to worry about next year, but for right now, it's the fall. We won the World Series. You heard great numbers from David. We're where it's going to work, where the rest of the country is where it's probably not going to work. So have a cold root beer or an adult beer, at a Topgolf or wherever, and have one more good cruise, in a car or whatnot. I'll loan you the Mustang if you're well behaved, and only do one burnout or don't it, and enjoy what's going on. So hopefully we should feel damn good. When I have to go, like I've had recently, go speak in Seattle, Boise, and LA, I'm not very popular, right? I don't have a good message. I'm stretching for stories there. I don't have to stretch. This is a great story. CoStar gave you the numbers. Hopefully I gave you some context. Any time for questions?
Questions for Casey?
Stock market, explain that.
Get the hell out of it, buy Bitcoin. I'll actually tell you, I recommended it was in Bitcoin when it was around $100, and I used to give a Bitcoin out at presentations for the best question. I wish I had all 18 of those coins back. There is a seasonality to Bitcoin, and we're in the wrong part of it right now. So what happens is corporations are using Bitcoin and crypto as a currency hedge because of what the Fed's doing. They're devaluing the dollar. So if an American automobile manufacturer wants to buy components or chips in Asia, and they get delivery of them 90 days from now, the dollar isn't worth anywhere what the price was, so it goes up. So they are loading up in the late fall to winter months, early winter months, crypto to deploy in the spring for all the components that they need. So what you'll notice is late spring, early summer, Bitcoin goes down to like 30,000. Then it charges back to 60,000. And the way you can foretell it is on major manufacturing companies. Look at Procter & Gamble, Ford, GM, Toyota. Go look at the Forex line on their balance sheet. And when it's building up, that's where they put crypto. They put it in Forex. And when Forex is rising, they're buying up Bitcoin. It's going to go up 25 to 50%. When you see it start to go down, they're deploying it and dumping it into the market, and it's going to go back down. So that's my tip on crypto. The stock market scares the hell out of me. 80% of the increase is in 20% of the stocks, and they're tech related. And what do we know about tech? It's future earnings, not current earnings. So if rates go up and everything else, we know about discounted cash flows, right, Eddie? That it's worth less when the rate goes up. And so tech's going to go down, and I really worry about where we're headed. I don't think the companies have priced in the financing costs. Look at the banks, they're going to get slaughtered. Everybody thinks if interest rates go up, the banks do well because their net interest margin goes up. No, it actually goes down because they're paying out more in CD deposits than what they're able to collect money at, and they have more bad loan type credit. So get out of the banks, get out of tech, do something you like, follow Warren Buffett, do Dairy Queen, do railroads, anything that he played with as a toy will do really well. Everything else, get the hell out of it. I'm all cash. Truth in statement. Yes, sir. The T-note. So my projection is that we will see the 10-year Treasury by spring break 3, and this time next year we could see a 4 or 5 year 10-year Treasury. Why? The Fed's already said they weren't going to raise or do quantitative easing relief until 2024, 25. What did they just say? Their last meeting. We're going to start to quit buying $15 billion a month. That's going to go to $30 or $50 billion a month. And so if they're not buying 10-year Treasuries and mortgage-backed securities and residential bonds, what's going to happen? We're going to get discovery. We're going to get true price discovery by the rest of the world and see what they're going to pay for a 10-year Treasury. And they're not going to pay 1.5%. They're going to want double or triple that. And there's too many other options. So I think we're, refinance now, get your deals locked and committed, look at your defeasance, call my friend Jeff here and have him run the analysis on defeasance penalties versus refinance. And what you'll find is you're probably better off doing a refinance. It's something like around 3% right now, even if it's a 5-year deal. And if all that fails and you got a small deal, go to a credit union. They're great commercial real estate lenders. We'll go over here.
Casey, you mentioned 500 million square feet of industrial space to be built in the next 5 years and it will move the needle.
Nope.
Of that, what percentage will be e-commerce?
So it's an interesting number. So if you talk to like a local guy, Sib Dowdy with King Industrial, 80% of all transactions in Metro Atlanta are small warehouse space. It's a small business stuff. It's last mile logistics. Amazon is going in and they're doing what they call retail to industrial conversion. When they go in and build a big e-commerce warehouse, they go into that market today and they look for 3 to 5 vacant big box stores that are closed, like a Kmart, Toys R Us, whatever. And they look for them in the zip code density of that market. So Amazon and FedEx know where the density zip codes are for package delivery. And so they go in, and when they get the approval to build the big e-commerce, they get the approval to convert the retail big box to industrial. So they don't have to fight them and don't fight all the trucking issues. And it's not all big e-commerce. It's probably about 30 to 40% is in that big number. We're going to see a big increase in cold storage, the groceries, the food, how the grocers do all of that stuff. And they may take a closed drugstore, a closed branch bank, and convert some of that to cold storage. Look at what's happening with Dollar General and Dollar Tree. FedEx is closing all of their retail stores, and they're putting them in Dollar General and Dollar Tree stores, 1,000 of them last year. And half of the space is becoming cold storage. It's wine, it's beer, it's milk. So we're going to see all of this stuff change. And so those numbers may be some retail conversion, retail to industrial conversion, and not all just these big mega. But these big mega ones, it's going to be massive as they realign the supply chain from the Inland Empire in California to, anybody know what the Inland Empire is in Florida? It's I-4 in Central Florida, Winter Haven between Orlando and Tampa. It's unbelievable. It is the new Inland Empire there. What we're going to be doing along the I-85 corridor, you could see 50 to 100 million square feet built that are suppliers, component suppliers, EV battery. Our REIT is closing on one in Vance, Alabama, near the Tuscaloosa. That's going to be the main EV battery and components for Mercedes in North America, in little old Vance, Alabama. And when it closes, it'll be the highest rent per square foot, the lowest cap rate, and the highest price per square foot of anything outside of Los Angeles and New York in our history. So we're going to see all these new places, Huntsville, Alabama. Look at what we're doing, from Conyers and West Georgia and West Point. Lots of places that are not going to be predatory on, say, our traditional stuff around here. Look what's going to happen, say, with all the old Patillo stuff, 85 in the North Lake area, that lower. That's all last mile logistics stuff for furniture, for all that, or movie sets, right? So it's amazing what has to go in because we're not going to places. We want to order it online. And so you have the big warehouse that, like Home Depot, we just closed and did their deal down in Locust Grove. 120-acre site. So they want 10-to-1 land to building ratio to expand. They wanted 3 refueling stations, hydrogen, LNG gas, and electric battery for trucks refueling. They already have all 3 coming into the place there. And that one store and its e-commerce will enable them to close up to 100 stores. That's how many stores that one facility can support. And they can do it within 12 hours. Anything you order. And a lot of their supply chain is changing. So if you order a Black & Decker tool, say, from Home Depot, it never goes through a Home Depot store or a Home Depot warehouse. The internet goes directly to the Black & Decker factory. They get the order, they process it that date, they 3D print a Home Depot wrapper, and it's at your house by the morning. I mean, what we're going to see in supply chain, additive manufacturing, 3D, we can't envision all of these changes, but the industrial space, the other thing on the capital side, right now, if you looked at NAREIT and all the institutional money, you'd find that they're 25% in office and 15% industrial. They want to flip those in the next 24 months. The amount of capital that's going to chase this and the cap rate compression. We have our REIT that just sold for the second time. We tried to get it done with Sam Zell, and the proxy advisors wouldn't approve it. So we just did a deal that we announced last Friday with ILPT at a 4.1% cap rate, average of $150 a square foot for 125 buildings. Cash deal, no contingencies. It's absolutely amazing. Anybody else? One more? Yes, sir. No. So great question. Can urban office be converted to residential? You jeopardize the structural integrity by poking holes for plumbing. That's the big thing. If you've built any office buildings since 1985, they're built in a manner that you can't just go punching holes like Swiss cheese to make for all the plumbing stack, and you don't have enough otherwise to route it through. So that's the challenge for office. You just can't get the plumbing to work. You can for a hotel. Hotel work out great. And the question you had for David about hotel, he's exactly right. The leisure and travel and the secondary markets. What we're discovering as groups is we're going to new places. We're not going to Las Vegas. We're not going to Orlando. We're not going to downtown Atlanta. We're not going to go to places like Chicago with perceptions of crime and not being safe and expensive and congested and horrible airport experiences like in Atlanta, right? They're going to other places. They're going to Charleston. They're going to Tampa. They're going to state parks. And so the leisure and travel side has come back. In fact, they're fully recovered essentially. But the business and convention and group business, it's really going to have to be figured out. I worry for us in Atlanta that depended on so much of that because of our convention center and all that, I think it's got some real bumpy roads to go. All right. Anyone?
Casey, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Well, thanks everybody for being here. I'd like to thank CoStar for being our presenting sponsor. For the table sponsors, the chapter sponsors, and everybody that bought tickets, thank you for being here. Have a great Veterans Day. Take care.